The wind was cold on the walls of King's Landing. Smoke rose in the distance as Daenerys Targaryen's dragons circled above the city. The war had reached its peak, and the streets below were filled with chaos. The people were scared, running, hiding, praying, some for survival, some for revenge. Arya Stark, dressed in black, moved silently along the rooftops, her face hidden beneath the shadows. The city was dangerous, but she had a mission. Arya had traveled a long way. From Braavos to Westeros, she had learned the ways of the faceless men, mastering the skills of stealth and death. But her mission was personal now. She didn't just want revenge for her family, she wanted to prevent more death. If she could stop Cersei Lannister, she might save thousands of innocent lives from the destruction that Daenerys' anger would soon bring. Inside the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister was drinking wine in her chambers. The Queen's golden hair shimmered in the candlelight. She had always believed herself untouchable, surrounded by guards loyal more to gold than to her. She didn't know that someone had already passed the walls unnoticed, someone trained to kill without being seen. Arya crept through the corridors, her dagger in hand. Every guard she passed was unaware of her presence. Her heartbeat was steady, calm. Years of training had taught her patience and silence. When she reached the top of the Red Keep, she paused to look down. Below her, the Queen's men were distracted, arguing about the advancing armies and the dragon's fire. She took a deep breath and whispered the names of her lost family. Ned, Robb, Jon, Sansa, Rickon, Bran, Nymeria. Each name gave her strength. She remembered the pain, the betrayal, and the countless lives lost to Cersei's cruelty. The faceless men had taught her that death could come quietly, and tonight she would bring it to Cersei. Cersei was alone now, sitting at the balcony, looking out over the city. She had always believed she controlled her destiny, that power was hers to wield. But Arya had learned one important truth. No one controls fate completely. Not even a queen. Arya moved silently, her shadow blending with the night. She stepped into the room, her dagger raised, eyes locked on her target. Cersei looked up startled. Who? Cersei's voice was cut short. Arya didn't speak. There was no time for words. The dagger found its mark. It was quick, clean, and silent. Cersei's golden hair fluttered like fire as she collapsed. Her eyes widened in shock, but before she could scream, Arya slipped out as silently as she had come. Outside, the city was burning. Daenerys' army was still advancing, unaware that the queen they sought to defeat had already fallen. Arya knew she had changed the course of history. Without Cersei to command the Lannister army, the chaos inside King's Landing might prevent the massacre she feared. Arya disappeared into the shadows, leaving no trace. The Red Keep was empty, the queen dead, and yet the war outside raged on. She thought of Jon Snow and Daenerys. How would they react when they learned that Cersei was gone? Would it change their decisions, their plans? She didn't know. For now, all that mattered was that she had completed her mission. As Arya watched the city from a distance, she realized something. Killing Cersei was not just revenge, it was a warning. Power could be taken by those who were brave enough to act, by those willing to step into darkness for the greater good. She didn't feel joy nor triumph. Instead, she felt a strange sense of calm. The Red Keep's shadows had taken another life tonight, but Arya Stark would live to see what came next. The night was quiet. For the first time in months, Arya felt free. But freedom came with responsibility. She had altered the war. She had changed history. And soon, everyone in King's Landing would notice the absence of their queen. The next morning, the city would wake to a new reality. Soldiers would search the Red Keep, wondering how their queen had died. Daenerys would need to make her move, and Jon Snow would face difficult choices. But for Arya, the work was done, for now. She vanished into the dark streets of King's Landing, a shadow among shadows, leaving behind only whispers of death and the faint hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the city could survive what was coming. The morning sun rose over King's Landing, painting the city in shades of orange and red. Smoke from the fires spread across the sky, and the streets below were full of chaos. Soldiers ran in every direction. Citizens hid in cellars, alleyways, and ruined buildings. But amid the chaos, a shocking discovery was about to shake the city to its core. Inside the Red Keep, the guards stumbled upon the Queen's lifeless body. Cersei Lannister, the feared and cunning ruler of Westeros, was dead. Panic and confusion spread quickly. Who could have done this? How did someone slip past the guards? And most importantly, what would happen to the city without the Queen? Sir Gregor Clegane, the Mountain, smashed his fist against the wall in anger. "This is impossible," he roared. "The Queen dead? No one could—" He stopped mid-sentence, realizing that Arya Stark, the girl from the north, had somehow succeeded where armies had failed. Meanwhile, in the streets, Daenerys Targaryen's army continued its march. The Unsullied and Dothraki had already reached the outskirts of the city, expecting fierce resistance. But when scouts reported the Queen's death, the tension shifted. The Lannister forces were leaderless, disorganized and confused. Arya watched from the shadows, her black cloak blending into the smoke-filled streets. She knew the city was not safe yet. Daenerys was still coming, and she feared the destruction that would follow if the dragons unleashed their fire. But for the first time, Arya felt the weight of hope. Without Cersei commanding the army, the massacre that might have happened could be avoided. In the Red Keep, Qyburn, Cersei's master of spies and secrets, scrambled to gather information. The Queen's death. "It cannot be," he muttered, pacing. "Someone planned this. Someone clever. Someone silent." His mind raced, trying to find a way to maintain control over what remained of the city. But without Cersei, the Lannister soldiers were unsure who to obey. Jon Snow, far from the chaos, rode through the hills outside the city with Ser Davos and a small group of soldiers. They had received reports of Cersei's death. Jon's expression was grim. "This changes everything," he said quietly. "The war was about defeating her, but now we have a chance to end the bloodshed before more innocents die." Daenerys atop Drogon circled the city. Her silver hair glowed in the sunlight, and her eyes burned with intensity. "Where is she?" she demanded. "I want Cersei alive or dead. I will not destroy the city if the Queen is gone." Her commanders hesitated, unsure how to respond. Tyrion Lannister, her hand, stepped forward carefully. "Daenerys, the Queen is dead," Tyrion said, his voice trembling slightly. "Arya Stark, He stopped, not wanting to reveal the entire truth yet. But Daenerys' eyes widened in disbelief. "Dead, are you certain?" "Yes," Tyrion said. "The Red Keep guards found her. Someone very skilled did this." He glanced toward Jon, who rode beside him. "Arya Stark." Daenerys' fury mixed with relief. The war could end without the destruction of King's Landing, but her mind was conflicted. She had prepared for battle, expecting to conquer, not negotiate. Now she had to rethink her plans. Inside the city, Arya moved carefully through abandoned streets. She avoided patrols and search parties, using her training to remain invisible. She had to find a safe place to hide and observe. Her thoughts were with Jon, Sansa, and the rest of her family. They had suffered so much because of Cersei, and now there was a chance for peace. Meanwhile, the people of King's Landing began to notice the absence of the Queen. Some cheered, thinking freedom had arrived. Others whispered fears of chaos, worried that the power vacuum would lead to even more bloodshed. Arya understood their fear. She had grown up knowing the price of war, but she also knew that this was the first step toward ending it. At the Red Keep, Qyburn sent his remaining loyal soldiers to search for the killer, but Arya was already long gone. Her plan had been flawless, silent, swift, and untraceable. She had become more than a Stark. She had become the shadow that could strike fear into even the strongest rulers. As night fell, Arya climbed a ruined tower and looked down on the city. The fires were dying, the streets quieter, and the soldiers confused. She thought of Jon and Daenerys and of the battles yet to come. She had changed the course of the war, but she knew that true peace required more than a dead queen. It required courage, justice, and careful choices. Somewhere in the city, whispers of Arya Stark's deeds spread. People spoke of a girl from the north who moved like a shadow, striking down the mighty Cersei Lannister. Fear and admiration mixed in the hearts of those who heard the story. The legend of Arya Stark was growing, and with it, hope for the people of King's Landing. But Arya knew her journey was far from over. Killing Cersei had been only the first step. The city was still full of danger. Daenerys's dragons could burn everything if she lost control, and the remaining soldiers might retaliate. Arya needed to stay one step ahead, watching, waiting, and striking only when necessary. That night, as the stars shone over King's Landing, Arya vanished into the darkness, a silent guardian in a city that had seen too much death. She had killed the queen, changed the war, and preserved a chance for peace. But she knew the flames of chaos were far from extinguished. The morning air was heavy with smoke and ash. King's Landing was still trembling from the chaos of the night before. Soldiers wandered the streets, unsure of their orders. Citizens cautiously emerged from hiding, looking for signs of safety. And above it all, Daenerys Targaryen hovered on Drogon's back, her silver hair blowing in the wind, her eyes burning with both fury and uncertainty. Daenerys had expected a war. She had prepared for fire and blood. But now, the queen she had come to defeat was gone. Arya Stark had killed Cersei before the city fell. The revelation shook Daenerys to her core. Tyrion approached cautiously, knowing the delicate balance of her emotions. "Daenerys," Tyrion began, his voice measured, "the queen is dead. The city can be taken without a single dragon's fire. There's no need for mass destruction." Daenerys's jaw tightened. "And yet thousands of lives were already at risk. How do I know the city will submit without violence? How do I know they will not fight back once they realize their queen is gone?" Her gaze swept over the walls below. Soldiers lingered, confused and leaderless, while the citizens peeked from windows and streets. "Without Cersei to command them, the Lannister forces are lost," Tyrion explained. "The mountain and Qyburn are not enough to maintain control. If we move carefully, we can prevent more death." Meanwhile, in the shadows, Arya watched silently. She knew Daenerys would come, and she had to remain hidden. She also knew that Jon Snow would have to navigate this new reality carefully. The North and the Vale were counting on him, and the people of King's Landing would suffer if the dragon's fury was unleashed. Inside the Red Keep, Qyburn struggled to maintain order. The Lannister soldiers were aimless, unsure whether to fight or surrender. Some even considered fleeing the city, afraid that a powerful enemy might strike at any moment. Qyburn sent out messengers, attempting to rally what remained of Cersei's forces. But the city had already felt the shock of her death, and morale was shattered. Arya moved silently through the ruined corridors, considering her next steps. Killing Cersei had been her mission, but survival now meant understanding the chaos she had created. She needed to observe, to learn what the city's new power dynamics were, and to ensure that innocent lives were spared. Jon Snow rode with his small group toward the gates of King's Landing. News of Cersei's death had reached him through scouts. Relief and concern warred in his chest. Relief that the war might end without more innocent bloodshed, and concern over Daenerys's temper and the unknown reactions of the remaining soldiers. As Jon entered the city, he found citizens cautiously coming forward. The queen is dead," some whispered. Others were unsure whether to cheer or hide. The city had been ruled by fear for years, and fear did not vanish overnight. Jon understood this. He dismounted and walked among the people, hoping to ease their panic. "The war is over," he called out. "Cersei is gone. No more fighting." Meanwhile, Arya witnessed Daenerys landing on the Red Keep's courtyard. Drogon's enormous shadow fell across the walls, and the citizens froze. Daenerys stepped down, looking around at the leaderless city, her gaze sharp. Tyrion followed, guiding her carefully. "We must take control without harming the innocent," Tyrion whispered. "The people fear what dragons can do." Daenerys nodded slowly, though her eyes still glowed with the hunger for power. "I will not burn this city, but I must show strength. If the soldiers sense weakness, chaos will return." At that moment, Arya realized something important. Killing Cersei had changed the battlefield, but it had not ended the war in people's hearts. She knew that Daenerys' actions now would define whether King's Landing would survive in peace or descend into further violence. The Lannister soldiers hesitated in the streets. Without orders from their queen, they didn't know whether to fight or surrender. Arya watched quietly as Jon Snow approached the largest group, holding out his hands. "Drop your weapons," he said firmly. "No one needs to die today." "Cersei is gone." Some soldiers obeyed immediately, others resisted for a moment, but ultimately the absence of leadership caused most to lay down their arms. Arya felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps the city could avoid the horror she had feared. Inside the Red Keep, Qyburn realized that his influence was ending. Without Cersei, without her commands, his power was meaningless. He scowled, knowing that the city he had served so loyally was slipping out of his hands. By nightfall, King's Landing had begun to calm. The dragons remained in the sky, silent, watching, but no fire had been unleashed. Citizens ventured cautiously into the streets, seeing soldiers laying down their swords and families, embracing for the first time in weeks. Arya, perched on a rooftop overlooking the city, allowed herself a rare smile. She had killed Cersei, changed the course of history, and prevented mass slaughter. But she also knew the journey was far from over. Daenerys' judgment, Jon Snow's choices, and the remnants of the Lannister army would shape the fate of Westeros in the days to come. For the first time in months, Arya felt a small measure of peace. She had acted not only for revenge, but for the greater good. And now, as the night fell over a city on the brink of change, she realized that true power lay not just in killing, but in knowing when to act and when to wait. King's Landing was alive, but fragile. The city had survived the shadow of Cersei's tyranny, but the flames of ambition and war still lingered. Arya Stark had made a difference, but she also knew that her next moves would define whether the city and Westeros could truly find peace. King's Landing had begun to breathe again, but the city's calm was fragile. Smoke still hung in the air, and the streets were strewn with rubble and debris from the battles of the past weeks. Soldiers wandered aimlessly, citizens whispered in corners, and the Red Keep, once the heart of tyranny, stood eerily quiet. Cersei Lannister was dead, and yet the city did not feel free. Something had shifted, but uncertainty lingered like a shadow. Daenerys Targaryen sat on a stone balcony in the Red Keep, her silver hair catching the sunlight. She stared at the empty streets below, her mind swirling with thoughts of victory, justice, and the destruction she had hoped to avoid. Arya Stark had killed Cersei before her dragons could strike, and while part of Daenerys felt relief, another part burned with frustration. "I came to save the city," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. And yet someone else decided its fate. Tyrion, ever cautious, stepped beside her. "She acted quickly," he said. "She prevented a massacre. The city lives because of her." "Not all victories require dragons." Daenerys' gaze hardened. "I understand that, but power must be claimed, Tyrion. If the people see me hesitating, if the soldiers sense weakness, chaos will return." Arya watched from a shadowed rooftop nearby, her eyes sharp. She knew Daenerys' temper and ambition well enough to predict the next hours. The Mother of Dragons wanted control, and now the balance of the city rested in the hands of a girl who had struck from the shadows, and the queen who had fire in her blood. Below, Jon Snow moved cautiously through the streets, accompanied by Ser Davos and a small contingent of soldiers. His boots crunched over broken stones, and his eyes scanned for signs of lingering Lannister resistance. The Northman knew the city's fragile peace depended on calm leadership. Any rash decision could undo the delicate balance Arya had created. Jon entered a small courtyard where a group of remaining Lannister soldiers had gathered. Many were afraid, confused, unsure whom to obey. Jon dismounted, holding his sword loosely at his side. "The queen is dead," he said firmly. "There is no reason to fight. Lay down your arms, and no harm will come to you." A few men hesitated, glancing at each other nervously. One soldier, younger than Jon expected, stepped forward. "And if your dragons decide to burn us anyway?" he asked, fear in his voice. Jon's gaze flicked toward the sky, where Drogon circled silently. "They will not," he said. "We fight only for justice, not for destruction." The soldiers' tension eased slightly, and others followed suit, dropping their swords and kneeling. Jon allowed himself a small sigh of relief. The first real step toward peace had been taken. Meanwhile, Arya moved through the city, unseen but alert. She knew Qyburn had survived the chaos, and some of Cersei's most loyal soldiers were still hiding, plotting revenge. She needed to gather information, understand their intentions, and, if necessary, strike again to prevent bloodshed. Inside the Red Keep, Qyburn paced, his mind racing. Without Cersei, his influence had collapsed. Yet he still held knowledge that could sway outcomes. Secret passages, hidden guards, and loyal men. He could cause trouble if he chose. But he hesitated, sensing that Arya Stark was already several steps ahead. One wrong move could cost him everything. That night, Jon and Daenerys convened in a quiet room of the Red Keep. Tyrion watched, silent but attentive. Daenerys' frustration was clear. She had wanted to lead the city into a new era, but Arya's actions had forced her to reconsider. "Jon," Daenerys said softly, almost pleading, "I came to free the people, and yet someone else decided what justice should be. Can you understand my position?" Jon looked at her steadily. "I understand, Daenerys, but not every battle requires fire. The people of King's Landing have already suffered enough. There is strength in restraint, even if it does not come from the throne." Arya, perched in the shadows outside the window, felt a twinge of relief. Jon's words reflected her own thinking. The city could be saved, but only if careful choices were made. She had killed Cersei, yes, but the next challenge was maintaining order without tipping the city into chaos. The next morning, rumors of Arya's deed had spread. Citizens whispered of a girl from the north who had slain the queen without a fight, changing the course of the war. Some feared her, some admired her, but all recognized the shift in power. Arya moved quietly among them, invisible and vigilant, knowing her role in this story was not over. In the Red Keep, Daenerys began to meet with the remaining city leaders, showing both strength and mercy. Jon assisted her, negotiating with soldiers and citizens alike. Together, they worked to prevent panic, maintain order, and secure the city's survival. Arya watched from the rooftops, silently approving their cautious steps. As night fell, the city seemed to breathe again. Soldiers patrolled with less tension, citizens ventured out cautiously, and the fires of war began to cool. Arya felt a momentary sense of calm. She had changed history by killing Cersei. Now she watched as the leaders of Westeros struggled to navigate the consequences, but she knew the shadows still held danger. Qyburn's mind was sharp, and Daenerys' temper unpredictable. Even Jon's honor could not shield the city from every threat. Arya Stark, the girl who had struck silently from the rooftops, realized that her journey was far from over. King's Landing had survived the night, but its true test had just begun. And from the shadows, Arya would watch, wait, and act when necessary to ensure the fragile peace endured. King's Landing was quiet in a way that felt unnatural. The city had survived the night, but the scars of war were everywhere, burned buildings, shattered streets, and the haunted eyes of citizens who had seen too much. Daenerys Targaryen paced in the Red Keep, her mind restless. She had wanted to claim the city with fire, to show her strength, to bring justice to Cersei and her followers. Yet now Cersei was dead, and the victory she imagined felt hollow. Tyrion watched her from across the room. "Daenerys, the city can be saved now. There is no need for fire. We can rebuild, and the people can live without fear of your wrath." Daenerys' eyes flashed with frustration. "I came to liberate them, Tyrion, and yet, without Cersei to strike down, my purpose feels diminished. How do I show strength without destruction?" Jon Snow stood quietly nearby, his expression thoughtful. He had seen her temper flare before, but he also recognized the weight of leadership. "True strength," he said softly, "is knowing when to act and when to hold back. The people will remember mercy more than fear." Above the city, Arya Stark moved like a shadow. She had killed Cersei, but her work was not finished. Qyburn was still alive, hiding in secret passages, likely plotting. Loyal Lannister soldiers could regroup if left unchecked, and the fragile balance of King's Landing depended on her vigilance. In the streets, the citizens were cautiously emerging. Some celebrated the absence of Cersei, while others whispered rumors of the girl from the north who had killed the queen in silence. Arya observed them, careful not to be seen. She had learned that fear could be as powerful as swords, but hope could change the hearts of many. That afternoon, Jon and Daenerys moved through the city together, speaking with soldiers and citizens, trying to restore order. Arya followed from a distance, noticing pockets of Lannister resistance hidden in basements and abandoned buildings. She realized that even in victory, danger lingered. One wrong spark could ignite the city again. Qyburn, aware that his power had crumbled, moved cautiously through secret corridors. He had been a master of manipulation, but without Cersei, his influence was weak. Still, he believed he could strike at the right moment, sowing confusion and fear. Arya anticipated this. She had learned that the cleverest enemies often waited in the shadows, and she intended to be there first. As night fell, Daenerys stood atop the Red Keep balcony, looking at the city below. Her dragons circled silently in the dark sky. She felt the tension of unspent fury, the desire to claim her place, and the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. Jon joined her. "Daenerys," he said quietly, "the city is alive because Arya acted. Without her, we would have faced fire and death. You must understand that mercy can be stronger than dragons." Daenerys turned to him, her eyes fierce but uncertain. "I want to rule justly, Jon, but I fear that without force, the city will see weakness. And yet, I cannot bring myself to destroy what remains." Arya, hidden in the shadows, listened. She realized that even dragons could hesitate, even conquerors could question their own judgment. Her role now was not just killing, it was guiding, protecting, and ensuring that justice prevailed without unnecessary bloodshed. That night, Arya struck again, but not with her dagger this time. She intercepted a group of hidden Lannister soldiers, planning an attack on the city gates. Moving silently, she disarmed them, used their own fear against them, and left them bound for Jon and his men to find. No one needed to die. The lesson of shadows had worked once more. In the Red Keep, Daenerys felt a growing respect for Arya, though she did not know who had acted so decisively. She understood now that power was not always about dragons or armies. Sometimes it was about courage, timing, and precision. Jon approached Arya the next morning, having traced the movements of the intercepted soldiers. "You've done more than anyone could imagine," he said quietly. "Without you, the city would have suffered. Your actions saved lives." Arya shook her head slightly. "I only did what had to be done," she replied. "Cersei's death was necessary, but preventing more bloodshed, that was the real challenge." Jon nodded. "The people of Westeros will need more than bravery. They need wisdom. And right now, you've shown both." As the sun rose over King's Landing, the city seemed to breathe again. Fires smoldered but did not rage. Soldiers had surrendered, and the citizens began tentative steps toward normal life. Arya knew the city's peace was fragile, but hope had returned, yet shadows lingered. The mountain could still act, loyalists could regroup, and the ambitions of kings and queens would never rest. Arya realized that her journey was far from over. King's Landing had been changed, history rewritten, and the future uncertain. But one thing was clear: shadows could protect the living, just as they could strike fear into the hearts of the cruel. And from the rooftops, Arya watched, ready for the next challenge, knowing that she had saved the city from fire, death, and chaos, and that her role in the history of Westeros was only beginning. King's Landing had survived the night of chaos. The streets were quiet for the first time in weeks, and citizens cautiously emerged, peering over burned debris and broken walls. The city felt fragile, like glass. One wrong move could shatter the tentative peace. Arya Stark watched from the shadows, knowing that though Cersei was gone, danger remained. Daenerys Targaryen stood on the balcony of the Red Keep, her dragons circling high above. She had chosen restraint, letting the city live despite her desire for total conquest. Her eyes, however, held a mix of fire and uncertainty. The absence of Cersei left a vacuum of power, and she knew the people of Westeros were watching her every move. Would she be a ruler who inspired fear or one who inspired hope? Jon Snow moved quietly through the streets, observing the aftermath of the chaos. Citizens were cautious but relieved. Soldiers had laid down their arms. The remnants of the Lannister army were scattered, leaderless, and uncertain of their future. Jon understood that the city's survival depended on careful governance, diplomacy, and justice, and on controlling the ambitions of those with dragons. Arya had her own work to do. The shadows of King's Landing were alive with secrets. Loyalists still hid, plotting revenge, and Qyburn remained somewhere in the depths of the Red Keep, scheming. She moved silently through the city, striking quickly where necessary, leaving no trace. Her goal was not vengeance now, it was preservation. The city must survive. In the Red Keep, Daenerys met with Jon and Tyrion. "The Queen is gone," Daenerys said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "And yet, power does not come easily. How do we ensure this city does not fall into chaos again?" Tyrion, ever cautious, replied, "We work together. Soldiers need guidance, citizens need protection, and we must show that justice and mercy are stronger than fear. That is how a city survives, Daenerys," Jon added. "Arya has shown us that one brave act can change history, but we must now act wisely, with strategy and care. The people must see that leadership is not about fear, it's about protection." At that moment, Arya emerged from the shadows, stepping lightly into the room. She had intercepted Qyburn and prevented an attempt to rally loyalists for a secret attack. Daenerys looked at her with curiosity. "Who are you?" she asked, though her eyes sensed the truth, that this was no ordinary girl. Arya's expression was calm, confident. "Someone who made sure the city lived," she said simply. "Cersei is dead. The rest of the shadows I've handled." Daenerys studied her silently, realizing that power did not always belong to those who sat on thrones or commanded armies. Sometimes it belonged to those who moved unseen, striking when necessary to protect life. Arya had changed the course of Westeros without a single roar of dragons. Jon nodded toward Arya. "She saved countless lives today," he said. "Without her, this city would have burned." Daenerys' face softened, though her fire still burned within. "I see now. Strength can take many forms." Today, it was shadows, not fire, that saved King's Landing. Over the next days, Daenerys and Jon worked together to stabilize the city. Soldiers were reassigned or sent home. Citizens were given aid and protection. Arya continued her quiet work, eliminating pockets of resistance and ensuring that no loyalists could threaten the fragile peace. Qyburn's schemes were undone, his influence destroyed. The people of King's Landing began to speak of a new era. Tales of Arya Stark, the shadow who struck down a queen without a fight, spread through the city. Children whispered her name in awe. Soldiers told stories of a girl from the north who had changed the course of the war. Even Daenerys could not ignore the power of a single act of courage. Jon and Daenerys met one final time atop the Red Keep. "The city lives," Jon said, "and we have choices now. We can rule with compassion or allow fear to dictate us." Daenerys smiled faintly. "I will choose mercy," she said. "And I will remember today that true strength can come from the shadows as well as the throne." Arya watched from afar, feeling a quiet sense of satisfaction. She had avenged her family, prevented mass bloodshed, and ensured that King's Landing would survive. But she also knew that her work was never truly done. Shadows would always remain, and she would remain vigilant, ready to act when needed. As the sun set over the city, King's Landing stood battered but alive. Dragons soared above, not as instruments of destruction, but as symbols of power held in check. Soldiers walked the streets, wary but peaceful. Citizens emerged cautiously, tasting freedom for the first time in years. And somewhere in the shadows, Arya Stark moved silently. the girl who had killed a queen, and in doing so, had changed the fate of Westeros forever. History would remember the war, the queens, the dragons, and the battles, but it would also remember the shadow, the lone girl from the north who struck quickly, acted wisely, and ensured that King's Landing survived. And in that survival, hope returned to a land that had long known only fear. Arya disappeared into the night, leaving behind a city alive with possibilities, and a Westeros forever changed by the choices of those brave enough to act. Shadows had ruled not for power, but for life, and sometimes that was the strongest power of all.